Story time about when a parasitic entity tried to straight up gaslight me into letting it in my house. This wasn't the first time that I experienced the paranormal, it certainly wasn't the last, but it was the most manipulative, and it started out kind of okay, and then it got really scary really quick. All of this started with a bunch of weird noises at night, as it does. So we heard a bunch of things that sounded like something walking around outside, something big, and we checked multiple times. It wasn't an intruder. It wasn't any kind of wild animal, which was my first thought. Then it started with tapping on the walls, and just things continued to escalate and escalate until finally I was like, there's obviously something that's hanging around outside. We should try it and talk to it. We should ask it who it is, what it wants, so I can tell it to fuck off. So we were using multiple divination methods. We were using multiple recording devices, multiple methods that it could speak through, right? So we started asking questions to try and determine who or what it was. First time it said it was my dead dad. And I was like, okay, then what did he teach me how to cook? What was the first recipe he ever taught me? And now my dad was super Italian, like second generation in America Italian. And it said spaghetti. Excuse me, isn't that like weirdly like prejudice somehow? The Italian guy taught his daughter spaghetti. Anyway, that's not what he taught me. So I was like, okay, so you're not that. And it immediately tried to pivot. Then it started saying it was a god. And I was like, that's a lie. So as soon as I called it out, as soon as I said, okay, that's a lie, that's bullshit, I'm not accepting that, the energy got like just super, super different. Now this is where shit gets creepy, and I'm sorry in advance. Once it realized it couldn't trick me into respecting it or trusting it, it stopped pretending. It stopped even trying to pretend it was something else. It resorted to begging. It started saying, a door, a door, a door. Just over and over like a broken record, a door, a door. So I said, a door for what? And it said, to go in, to go in, to go in. I said, in where? And it said, your house. I said, that's not gonna happen. And it said, let me in, let me in, let me in. A door, a door, a door. I said, why do you want to go in? Why do you want to be in my house? And it said, for blood. I said, all right. So yeah, I trapped that thing and got rid of it because fuck that. Make a follow-up video after this and tell people how I got rid of it because that thing was fucking creepy.
So this girl says that this happened to her a while back when she still hung out with her ex's family. It was almost like they were married because she became girlfriend and boyfriend with the guy, and then she moved in with him and his entire family. She did live with them for about 3 to 4 years, and their relationship did have their ups and downs just like any other relationship. She explains that on every Day of the Dead, this family had the habit of spending the night at the cemetery. And just a heads up, it is normal for some people in Mexico to stay the night at the cemetery, especially when their loved ones are all like in the same spot. They do stay there and they pray over them. They stay there and eat with them, just things of that sort. If you've seen the movie Coco, you know what I'm talking about. For this family, it was them celebrating their loved ones, and she said that she started to celebrate with them as well as the years went on, and she would go with them to the cemetery too. Now, it was the very first time that she had spent Day of the Dead with them at the cemetery where this happened to her. She explains how she got along really well with her brother-in-law because they were closer in age than she was to her boyfriend, and they also had very similar interests. So every time they go to a party or like a family gathering, they would spend their time together just talking about different things away from everybody else. Now, she mentions this because that's exactly what happened when they got that night to the cemetery. They get there and they both sit on chairs together, and everybody else sat around like another area. It started to get really cold, so the family started a fire and everybody went to go sit down around the fire, which was also surrounded by the family's tombs. So she's sitting around the fire talking to her brother-in-law, and that is when her boyfriend comes up to them and says, hey, it appears that we're not going to be the only ones staying the night at the cemetery. When her and her brother-in-law look back, they see that there's an old lady waving at them like a good distance away. They obviously waved back at the old lady, and then they started giggling because she just looked kind of silly, like far away and just waving at them out of nowhere. After this is when the brother-in-law thought it was the perfect time to start telling ghost stories and paranormal stories, and being that her boyfriend did not like that very much, he walked away to talk to his sister who was like across from them. But she stayed there because obviously she also loves scary stories and she wanted to hear what the brother-in-law had to say. So after a while, telling ghost stories, they both turned to see if they could see that old lady again, but they couldn't see her anymore, and they thought they had seen her walk toward the entrance again, but they weren't too sure. What they did see though were 3 ladies walking into the cemetery and going towards like farther away from them. They were also all in black, so they basically lost sight of them at a certain point. Not a long time had passed when they had lost sight of the 3 women, where they suddenly saw somebody running from that end of the cemetery towards them, and by the time the person got to where they were, they realized that that it was actually the security guard, and he asked if he could stay with them just for a few moments, and obviously they agreed. When they saw him, they noticed that he was like pale, so the family offered him a drink, they offered him food, and he took it and sat down and calmed down for a little bit as well. She explained how her and her brother-in-law couldn't stop looking at him, like they knew something was up. Even though everybody else started to ignore him after they gave him like the drink and food, they just couldn't stop looking at him because they knew something was wrong. She explains how her brother-in-law was not the type to stay with that curiosity, so he ended up calling that security guard and telling him to come sit next to them so that they can keep him company. By this point, her boyfriend and the boyfriend's sister also got very curious and decided to come and sit next to them as well, because they wanted to know why the fuck he had just ran from that deep end of the cemetery. So by this point, it's her brother-in-law, sister-in-law, her boyfriend, and the security guard, and that is when she decides to ask the security guard, what happened? Like, what's wrong? Are you okay? The security guard very honestly says, no, I'm not okay. I think something happened to me that people claim happened here, but I had never experienced it myself. So this is the security guard's story. He said that he was doing his rounds and that they had already told him that only 3 families were going to stay in that cemetery overnight. Even though 3 families were going to stay there overnight, they still told him to go around the cemetery, because around this time, some people are prone to going into cemeteries and stealing bones, even people's jewelry or things like that. So obviously he still needed to do the rounds all around the cemetery and not just where the people were going to stay overnight. So at that moment, he was in a part of the cemetery where no one was going to stay the night. It was like one of the oldest parts, and that is when he sees 3 women back to back with each other walking in a single line. All 3 women were walking with their heads down, and they had black veils all over their faces as well. He was about to go up to them because he didn't have in his registry people that were going to stay the night there, and being that he saw 3 older women, he didn't think that they were any threat. So he was about to walk up to them to see what they were doing there, or if he can help them with anything. Now, because they weren't such a threat to him, he was just walking at his pace towards them, being that he saw that they were walking too. But the more he walked towards them, the more he couldn't keep up with them or catch up to them. It got to the point where he started running towards them, and he just still couldn't keep up with them. And that is where he saw them enter this mausoleum, and they just completely disappear. When he finally gets to this mausoleum, he notices that the door, it's surrounded by a chain, and the chain is still full of dust, meaning like it was not open. There's no way that these ladies could have gotten in there. He also knew that it had been a very long time that no one had gone to there to visit family members, and that is when he realized that something else was at play, and he just started running out of there and ran into the family that was staying overnight there. By the time he got to there, he just knew he couldn't keep running, so he needed to gain his strength just for a few moments and then continue running towards the entrance because he planned to get the F out of there. All 4 of them decided to walk the security guard to the entrance, and she explains how he was still pale. He still looked very scared even after they walked him like outside of that cemetery. By the way he looked, by the way he was acting, there was no way that he could have made up that story, or at least that's just her opinion. After they went back to sitting around the fire, they also were just like thinking like, I wonder if it was the same ladies that we had seen who were walking back there at the time that, you know, they saw the 3 ladies walking by all dressed in black. They also started thinking about that lady that was waving at them from far away, where they thought it looked kind of silly. They were like, was she real? Was she not real? Like, what is going on? I hate to say it, but I feel like if I was already staying the night at the cemetery, I might have gone back there with my friends and families just to check it out, just to see, you know. Maybe not, I don't know. Maybe I'm just saying this because I'm sick and I don't know any better right now. Nah, I would still go just because I'm nosy, just to see if the ladies are there or not, because I never saw them leave. If I don't see them there and I never saw them leave, then maybe the security guard was telling the truth. Anyway, what do you guys think? I made it to the end of the video with a voice still. Sound like shit, but still, I made it, yeah.
She felt multiple pairs of hands reaching up and trying to grab her and pull her down. A woman named Diane from Los Angeles, California, sent her story in to a paranormal research site. She was 22 years old and she was going through a divorce, and she needed somewhere to stay with her 2-year-old son, Gabriel. So Diane's best friend Sharon's family opened up their home to her in her time of need until Diane was able to get back up on her feet. So Diane and Gabriel shared Sharon's room, and they all shared the bed together. Just before Diane even moved in, Sharon warned her about something. She told her that sometimes in the middle of the night, she would feel the sensation of the bed sinking down, as though something was laying in next to her. She also said that at times she felt the sensation of something laying down on top of her, and other times the feeling of being completely choked out. Yeah, no, sure, I'd love to move in. And unfortunately, Diane didn't really have a choice, so she took it all in and then moved in anyway. Poor woman. So for months, everything did remain pretty normal and nothing really happened. And Diane began to assume that maybe Sharon was just having some bad dreams. But one night, the insomnia started, and she could not stop waking up. She was sleeping on the left side of the bed facing the wall, and Gabriel was in the middle, and Sharon was on the right side facing out into the direction of the open bedroom. Now here's the crazy part. So the bed was pushed directly flush up against the wall, yet she said that every time she would wake up, she was waking up to the feeling and the sensation of multiple hands reaching up between a space that wasn't there, between the bed and the wall, and grabbing at her body and her arms and her legs to pull her down underneath the freaking bed. And she would jerk awake and look around and expect to see them, but then there was nothing there. So the next night, she decided to switch sides with her friend, and now she is on the right side facing out into the room. She said this decision was a bad one, and it is something she will never forget as long as she lives. So she's sleeping, and then all of a sudden she just opens her eyes, like no thought with it, just woken up out of her dead sleep and looking around the room now. Obviously, we're pretty nervous about this at this point. She said when her eyes focused in the darkness, she saw something standing in the corner of the bedroom. She said this thing was at least 7 to 8 feet tall, and if it were standing up straight, the head would have touched the ceiling, but it was bent forward at the waist, leaning in towards her, just enough to make it very clear that it was looking right at her. This thing was completely black, and it was wearing a hooded cloak exactly like the Grim Reaper. And where the face should have been was just complete darkness. There was nothing in there, no face, no eyes, no features. But she knew without a shadow of a doubt that this thing was staring directly at her. She said emitting off of it was just absolute hatred, a feeling that she has never felt before, pure, utter evil. She said she just knew it despised her. It hated her, and it hated that she could see it. She said she felt the hatred move across the room and hit her in the chest. She was too terrified to speak. She could barely move. She did not reach over to wake up Sharon. She did the only thing she could think of, which brought her back to when she was a small child, and raise the blanket up and cover her head with it and just lay there, hoping that it wouldn't get her. And eventually she fell back asleep, which I'm sorry, absolutely not. There's no way I'm getting any sleep after that. So first thing in the morning, she turns over to Sharon, and when she wakes up, she says, "Oh my God, last night I saw this huge black thing staring at me." And before she could even explain where, Sharon just pointed over to the corner of the room where it was and said, "Over there," real mundane, matter-of-factly. And Diane's like, "Yeah." And then Sharon's just like, "Yeah, I see it all the time." Like, are we kidding? That's freaking crazy. Like, to get used to something like that and be so matter-of-fact about it. And that was it. That was the end of the conversation. Diane prayed that she would never see anything like it again, and luckily she didn't. And no one has ever found out what it was or gotten to the bottom of it. Ugh, just a mystery. So I know I've heard a lot of stories about people describing the Hat Man, which is similar, always looming in a door frame or in a corner, staring at the person in bed, which, oh my God, my husband even experienced that. This is a new one. So drop your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever experienced anything like this? Gotta share it with me. And if you're new here, definitely follow for more creepy story time.
The person that sent me the story called it Strange Experience. By the way, if you have a story that you'd like to share with our community about glitches in the Matrix, dreams, aliens, cryptids, or the paranormal, you can send it to this email address. And remember, we believe you. I thought I would tell you about something that happened to me in the 1990s, which I haven't told many people because it just seems too weird. I was in Dublin, Ireland at the time on summer vacation. One afternoon, I was walking along Dawson Street when I decided to pop into a pub for a late afternoon beer. The pub in question was the Dawson Lounge, which also happens to be the smallest pub in Ireland and is situated in the basement, accessible only by a flight of steps going down from the street. As I was turning to go down these steps, there was a group of men, distinctly Nordic appearance, all wearing identical blue tracksuit type outfits, also descending the steps to visit the pub, so I was in the midst of the group. They were speaking in what I presumed to be a Scandinavian language, although I couldn't identify it. There was something fascinating about them that I can't exactly describe. I assumed they were a visiting sports team who were curious to visit the smallest pub in Ireland. I went to the bar and ordered a beer, and the men stood at a slight distance, still chatting, and some had a beer also. Very soon, however, I noticed that they were going in one by one to the men's room. This in itself was not strange, but what surprised me was that soon the group had almost all gone in. Why would so many go in almost at the same time? How could they fit inside? I was intrigued and I decided to explore. Before I could even get to the place, the last man had gone inside. Full of curiosity, I opened the door of the men's room and went inside, and there was nobody there. I checked the windows and saw that there was no way they could have gone out that way, and there was really only space for about 3 people in there anyway. It's a strange feeling when you find yourself in a situation that has no physical explanation. Even at the time, I came to the conclusion that they were no sports team, but a group of visiting extraterrestrials who had used a portal to exit their trip. P.S. I had only drunk barely half a glass of beer before I went to check out the men's room, so there was no question of being intoxicated, just in case someone might think otherwise. I was only there a matter of minutes before the incident even happened. Another strange thing is that I never thought to ask the barman if he had noticed what happened, and I hardly even mentioned the incident to anyone afterwards. It's like I just accepted it as what I suspected it to be, and I left it at that. I never had any other experiences similar to that before or since. The difficulty is that when you tell people about such an experience, they try to find normal explanations for it, but they can't, other than that you were mistaken somehow. I had no choice but to accept it as part of my lived reality, and my own explanation for it somehow made it acceptable. I mean, if it wasn't that, what could it have been? The end! I'm going to be 1000% honest with you right now. What you said is exactly what I was going to say. I was going to say there was a portal in the bathroom, and I was also going to say, you said that they were like Nordic looking, that they were actually aliens. Maybe they were visiting Earth and they were like dressed up like they were a sports team, so people would think they were like a sports team, but they were really just aliens like wanting to visit Earth. But I agree, I have no other explanation, and what a cool and weird experience. Thank you so much for sharing.
Are you ready for another Freemason story? You better get comfortable because I am back with another spooky story. So we're gonna call the person who submitted the story Laura. Laura says this is her grandfather's story, so buckle up. Laura's grandfather was a high-ranking Freemason. In the 50s, he gathered a lot of money and connection. He was a lawyer and accounted for Braden Cooper, which was a North American copper mine situated in her country. Now, Laura's grandmother stated that she didn't know that he was a Mason until he died. While Laura's grandfather was well-versed in magic, they found a lot of ceremonial things in books after he passed. Laura's grandfather died before she was born, but she's always felt connected to him in a way that she can't explain, as he used to visit her in her dreams. Now, Laura grew up to become a professional musician. As an opera singer, she became one of the specialists in the role of Queen of the Night in her country. She studied in Germany for a while. That opera is about Masonic initiation. It was premiered as an entrance piece from Mozart to the Freemasons. At the time, Laura knew this, but she didn't really care. So fast forward, Laura becomes friends with this girl in her 20s. The girl invites Laura to her grandmother's house on the coast. Well, when Laura arrived, they had a little talk with the grandmother. The lady asked Laura if she could help her fold some sheets in her room. So Laura went in, but when Laura entered that room, there were Masonic symbols everywhere. So Laura asked the grandmother, who is a Mason here? And she said, me and my husband, dear. Laura proceeds on telling them that her grandfather was a Freemason, and the lady replied something that froze Laura's blood. Lady said, yes, I know. We know who you are. We have been tracking you, and I brought you here to let you know that whatever you need, we are always guarding you. Laura thanks her and left the room. Laura says now she knows both lodges are separated, men and women don't attend the same one. But she realized that the husband was in fact from the same lodge as her grandfather's. So some time passed and Laura was having a very, very bad time. Laura began reading tarot, learning numerology. She used numerology in music and interpretation. Laura's always been very interested in learning. But when she attempted to read herself in a tarot, every single reading said something like, "What is protecting you will not help you rise." And Laura never understood. One day, Laura had a performance in Mahler's Second Symphony. It says, "You will be reborn." It was called Resurrection, in fact. Laura was feeling blocked and having an economically horrible time because at that point, her mother stole money from her due to a gambling addiction. Laura couldn't even afford groceries at the time. But when she sang that performance that was called Resurrection, she said she sang it with her whole body and faith and asked whomever was above her to help. After that performance, outside the theater, she found an estranged friend who now works as a shaman. He tells her, "They told me to clean something out of you." Laura was perplexed, but she agreed. They winded up linking up the next day. Started the cleansing ritual and passed a candle through her body, and it always turned off in her lower back, the root chakra. During the cleansing, with her eyes closed, she saw something escaping her body. Her body undulated in a very unnatural way, but at the same time, she felt really calm. After the ritual, he said that he had liberated an entity and found a seal on her lower back shaped like an M that was blocking her resources and abilities. He asked her if anybody from her bloodline was a Mason. She told him that her grandfather had been one of them, and he said a ceremony had been made that compromised his bloodline. This part actually made my stomach drop. The ceremony was an alchemical sex ritual that was done with her grandmother. She did not know what was going on. Laura went home that day and she was exhausted, so exhausted she could barely move. She cried uncontrollably and didn't know why. She began looking through her grandfather's books and found one on alchemical sex. Well, her grandfather accomplished exactly what he wanted. Incredible wealth and power, which in their case was not only his but also from the grandmother as well, who was a socialite and inherited a lot of it. And of course, the author never said what the cost of the ritual was, so most of the money that her grandfather made was lost within 20 years after he passed. Well, since that cleanse, Laura's life changed completely. She began a career as an opera stage director and now live from a baggage lifestyle because she's always traveling. And Laura says what she wants to say is important. She said, "People who descend from the 1950s Mason thread, please get a good shaman and get cleansed because you could, like her, be blocked by a family pact that is not yours." That is everything Laura submitted. Yeah, if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask your favorite Haitian homegirl.
Do you want to hear a scary story? Of course you do. One of my followers sent me in the story time and I read it at 3 a.m. And I advise you don't do that because this one actually freaked me out. So let's get right into it. Hi, I was wondering if you could tell my story. It is kind of creepy. Me and my auntie were doing a live on Facebook showing off our birthday outfits and we decided to tell our own ghost story experiences. And we were doing this for about an hour with nothing happening. This was until my auntie was telling a story about how she came face to face with a demon. I'm sorry, I need to hear your auntie tell this story. While she was telling this story, I heard a growl right beside us. I thought I was going crazy until my auntie looked at me and said, "Did you hear that?" And I just nodded. We both decided to brush it off and get off the live and go to bed. That's smart. I would have done that as well. Best thing to do when it comes to things like that is just ignore them. Don't give them any power, just move on with your life. Anyways, we get ready for bed and I decide to lay down and we start getting comfortable. After a while, she drifts off to sleep, but I stay and scroll on TikTok at this time. Relatable. It got to about 3 a.m. and as I'm scrolling, something pulls my hair really hard. Terrifying. Actually gives me goosebumps thinking about it. I yell so loud my auntie wakes up and I explain to her what happened. My auntie's terrified and she starts praying, and while she's praying there is a sound in the kitchen and it is whispering my name. I literally cannot even begin to describe how much that would have freaked me out, hearing my own name being whispered from a part of the house in which I know nobody's in. The whispering was pretty loud and it didn't sound human at all. Of this, I'm sure. I was extremely terrified. Me and my auntie don't go on live anymore, and we don't bring up that night at all. And that is when my follower ended the story. To my knowledge, nothing else happened after that. But such a terrifying experience. I definitely would not recover if that happened to me. Let me know what you think in the comments. And again, thank you so much to my follower for sending this to me. I love telling spooky stories and hearing about spooky experiences that people have. So if you have any spooky experiences that you want to tell me, please drop me a message, or leave them in the comments down below, because I love telling and reading and finding out about stories like this.
Something evil is lurking beneath the surface of Missouri's Pomme de Tir Lake, and even though it followed me, I don't think I want to know what it is. This is Vic's submission to Spooky Scary Storytime, and he says in 2023 he was camping on Pomme de Tir Lake with his mom, his younger brother, and his younger brother's grandparents. They have different fathers, and it was just a big family get-together. But anyway, Vic said at the time he was feeling antisocial, and he decided he was going to sleep in his mom's car. Just preferred to be alone, and the campsite itself wasn't much anyway. It was just his mom's Ford Explorer, a small camper where the rest of the family slept, and then a small stretch of land along the lake with dense forest surrounding it. One of the things Vic really wanted to do on this trip was go night fishing, and on the second to last night of his trip, he finally got his chance, and he packed up his gear, and about an hour before sunset, he walked along the inlet and down the bank with his gear, and it was very peaceful. He just wanted some time away from everyone else, and it was just him and the sunset and the stillness of the water. First, he said it was very peaceful, and he could see the reflection of the orange sunset in the water, and even though the woods were growing darker by the minute, fireflies started to come out, and they were sort of illuminating in these pretty little bursts, and he was having a really good time. But the moment that the sun set, everything changed. About 30 minutes after the sun had completely set, he said he heard something very large moving on the other side of the inlet, and he heard like branches and leaves rustling, and then it sounded like something got into the water. I remember pausing and listening and then shrugging it off and thinking, oh, it was probably just a deer or some other large animal that was coming down to the water for a drink. But the trees along the bank were casting large dark shadows across the water, which made it impossible to see what was actually there. Although he said he could see the surface of the inlet, but then the sounds completely stopped and whatever was rustling had gone still. Complete silence followed, and he said looking back, that's probably the moment that he should have left, but he just figured whatever this was had walked away, and so he stayed. A few seconds later, Vic said he noticed the smell of wet rot drifting across the air, and he said it was strong enough to notice. It was absolutely disgusting, but he was in the middle of the wilderness next to a lake. It could have been anything. Wind shifts, changes directions, there's a million explanations. That's what he told himself happened until he noticed that about 25 feet away from him on the surface of the water, ripples started spreading. On the surface of the water, they were small at first and then grew larger, like something was rising from below. He stared at the surface of the water, trying to make sense of what he was seeing, and that's when he saw a pair of huge antlers emerge from the water. And at first he told himself that this was elk, but he didn't know of any elk that swam after dark, and besides that, there were no elk that he knew of in the area. As his brain struggled to process what he was seeing, he noticed that the smell of wet rot had shifted into one of sulfur, and it was so strong that it seemed to coat the inside of his nose. And as the antlers rose into the air, he noticed that what was attached to the antlers was not an animal head at all, but it seemed to be that of a humanoid figure. Every instinct screamed at him to run, but he was taught not to panic in dangerous situations and thought, it must be my mind playing tricks on me. So he quietly packed his things. As he did his best to stay composed, but his hands were shaking and he kept dropping his lures and the rest of his gear. And every second felt longer than the last, but finally he mustered up the courage to look back at the water and saw that the ripples had stopped. The ripples had gone still, but somehow that felt worse because he hadn't actually seen whatever it was make its way to shore. At that moment, he says he was overcome with the awareness that something was standing directly behind him and towering over him because he felt cold breath on the back of his neck. Said it was cold like I have never experienced before. It was like standing in front of an open freezer and every muscle in my body locked up. He said he was too afraid to turn around and look because he was terrified of whatever it was that stood behind him. So instead he pretended like he was completely unaware that something was standing behind him, and he continued packing his gear until he was done, and he turned to head back to camp. The stretch of shoreline that he had chosen had a small ledge that separated it from the trail, and so he had to climb it. But as he climbed it, he said he was aware that something was standing there watching him. Never looked back, not once. And as he reached the trail, he said every instinct was screaming at him to run, but he forced himself to remain composed. The entire way back, he says he could feel something following behind him. He said, I don't know what it was, but it was not human and it was not animal. When he returned to camp, he refused to sleep in the Explorer and instead slept on the floor of the camper as far as he could get away from the door. And even his mom said that he was so shaken up. She's never seen him that scared since he was a little kid. And he says what's strangest about this is there was really no warning, no bad feeling beforehand, just the sense that something suddenly went wrong. And then he said he saw this antler figure rise from the water. To this day, he says, thinking about it makes him feel sick. And honestly, I was intrigued by this, so I went down the rabbit hole a little bit and I tried to look into sightings of strange things around this lake, and I found nothing. So if anyone's from the area and you have any idea of what this could have been, please let him know. He'll be seeing the comments. And if you have a spooky scary story time of your own, send it in. We would love to hear it.
It is time for another spooky story. Y'all, this one made me sick. It is so freaking creepy. Buckle up. I am Autumn in Appalachia. Send me your spooky stories. Add me on Facebook. Subscribe on YouTube. Same handle. Without further ado. This follower's name is Courtney. I'll be tagging her on TikTok. Now, from her bio, it looks like she lives in South Carolina. She said that this story took place when she was 18, and it was right after she and her family moved to a new rental property. Now, she said that this house was on old war and plantation soil, so there was some spooky happenings in general, but this particular story scarred her for life, and I understand why. So one night, Courtney gets home after hanging out with friends. It's dark. She gets ready for bed. She hops in the bed, and not long after, she's asleep. She said she began having a dream that it sounds like it's like a lucid dream. She said it is very vivid. It is very real. And she could even control in dreams, she said, like when she chooses to wake up, right? So that's important for context. In this dream, she is in this like big suburban neighborhood, big pretty houses, and she said the sky is like super bright, vibes are good. She looks over, and in one particular yard there's some kids playing outside, so she goes over to that house, and it's all siblings from like ages 9 to 16. They invite her inside the house, and as soon as they get in the house and they begin like going up the stairs, vibes change. She said that the lights are flickering, and it just had this like very creepy vibe to it. The kids start explaining they live in a very haunted house and that it is getting worse. Then the smallest girl in the group is like, hurry, it's coming, we need to leave. And so they are like trying to hurry back down the stairs to leave, and they're able to get out of the house, and that is when they get in the family car and they start driving away. As they're making their getaway, Courtney starts to feel better because, again, light and airy vibes outside. The sky is super bright over them. Well, the same smallest girl, she's sitting in the back seat, and she suddenly says, it's not over. And then her eyes roll back in her head. She starts convulsing, and Courtney is looking at this in horror when all of a sudden, appearing right next to this little girl, is this black demon. And she says that it has like very white, bright eyes, and it has like sharp animalistic type of teeth, just a terrifying, menacing appearance. And it's sitting in the car seat next to them. Now, back to Courtney's ability to lucid dream and wake up when she chooses to. When she sees this demon, scares the shit out of her so bad, she's like, wake up, wake up. She does. And when her eyes pop open to her dark bedroom, on top of her body, right in front of her face, is this demon looking straight at her. She's looking at it, and she said that when the demon realized she is awake, it gets this look of like panic, almost like you're not supposed to see me. And it looks at her, it looks around the room, and then it jumps off of her body and runs into a mirror that she had in her bedroom and disappears into this mirror. Courtney said she was so terrified when she woke up and was face to face with this thing in real life that she could not even scream. It like paralyzed her voice. After this thing disappears into the mirror, she bolts out of her bed and goes and sleeps in the room with her parents for the rest of the night. And that's where the story ends. I assume she never saw it again. I hope to God not. She did say, like I said, there are other spooky things that happened in this house, but that one stands out in her mind. Y'all, we've told stories on this channel before where like dreams have translated into real life. My mom even has a story about that that's on my personal scary story playlist. Oh my God. Y'all let me know what you think in the comments. Stuff like this creeps me out so bad. I'll catch y'all in the next one.
Back in 2018, my friend and I were driving through Nevada to get to California, and it was around 2 a.m. We were taking some back roads to avoid some traffic, and so most of the time we were just seeing a lot of desert. We were thanking the heavens that our gas tank was full because there was no gas stations, there was no towns, there wasn't any other drivers except for one that was right behind us, and they were there for a while. They stayed there for at least 45 minutes. They didn't get closer, they never passed, they didn't really fall back. They stayed right at the same pace the whole time. My friend actually made a joke that we were being followed, and we went around this little bend and we came to a huge like chain link fence, and it stretched. It was a big fence. There wasn't any signs, there wasn't any other buildings. You literally couldn't see. There's nothing past the chain link fence that you could see. Our GPS told us that the road continued, but we were stopped at like the locked gate. The car behind us, they wound up stopping about 100 yards back, and they had their headlights on just right at our car. We turned around, we started to head back the way that we came, and as we were driving, we saw like a dirt road. Our GPS wasn't telling us to go on it, but my friend turned anyways just to see where it would lead us. And the car behind us, they actually didn't follow. They stayed on the main road, which you would think would have made us feel better. For some reason, it just made it feel a little bit worse. Anyways, we kept driving down this dirt road, and we came to this area where there was just a whole row of poles. And on top of the poles were like surveillance cameras. There had to have been at least 20 of the cameras, and they were all facing towards the desert, not towards the road, towards us. And my friend turned off the car, and we just sat there staring, trying to figure out what they were trying to surveillance. And that's when our radio came on, and it wasn't like music or static. It was a clear voice, and it said turn around. So my friend turned back on his car, and that's what we did. We turned around. As we were driving back, we noticed that there was like hundreds of car tracks, like so many tire tracks. It looked like people had been coming in and out like the whole day of where we just came from. Anyways, we were driving down this road. The car that was stuck they stayed on the main road. They actually did wind up following us again behind us. We got to a gas station, and the car continued on. They didn't go to the gas station with us, and we filled up. Eventually, we hit our destination. The next day, we were curious, and so we checked our dash cam. We wanted to figure out what the voice could have been, or if there was anybody in the vicinity of us. But it wasn't that was the weird part. The weird part was the timestamp. So according to the timestamp of the dash cam, we were sitting there for 6 hours. We were there for 15 minutes tops. There's no way we were there for 6 hours. But all of the footage is our car on, the headlights on. Neither of us got out of the car, and neither of us can explain where the other 5 hours and 45 minutes went. But this isn't the first time I've heard of this happening. I feel like every story submission that I get about going on some off-road in Nevada, it's like a weird time jump. So you never know.
Let's read another scary story. This one is titled The Man in the Photograph. Welcome to the Creepy Cozy Cottage, where creepy and cozy meet. So grab a blanket and get cozy, because we're about to read a creepy story. I live a rather quiet life usually, and on any other day I would have gotten up the same as ever, leaving the bed as quietly as possible so as to not wake up my wife, brushing my teeth, taking out our dog Petey, getting changed into my work clothes, and driving to work. This morning, though, had stopped me in my tracks. Let me start by telling you I don't usually use my phone often, and I rarely have any use for it except to ask my wife to remind me of things like shopping lists or to tell her when the dogs were out last for a walk. I don't have any kind of social media either. Neither does she. We're too old for that kind of thing these days. And when it all started coming out, we had young kids who we didn't want to embarrass with excessive photos and videos of their swim meets and spelling bees. Our kids are, I think, quite glad about that. That being said, I know plenty of people, our kids included, who use their phones for pretty much anything these days, though I never saw the point. This morning changed that, though. I wish I had been more tech savvy when it was all coming out. I hope someone with more knowledge on phones and social media is listening and can offer some insight into what's going on. I thought it was some strange dream when I first saw it, my eyes adjusting to the harsh light of the phone screen. I had woken up to a message from an unknown number, which didn't seem particularly unusual to begin with, but the message contained 3 attachments. I didn't make much out of the attachments except for the small preview one of each of them. That's when I truly began to worry. From what I could see, dark and grainy as the image was, there was a figure lying, pooled in blood, in the middle of its frame. I guess it might seem rather common for other people to see a message like this, and it be rather easy to write off as something a friend would send them as a prank, which I have thought about briefly, but very few people other than close family friends have my phone number, and I couldn't think of anyone who would do this. Perhaps it was my body warning me of the horror of it all, but seeing this notification gave me a sudden flash of anxiety and a sinking feeling in my stomach. I should have listened to this reaction. I should have swiped it away from my phone and got on with my day. Something between a kind of morbid curiosity and a sickening fear had gripped me in those moments. I tapped my thumb hard to the screen. Text message, today at 3:22. The sight upon opening my phone was even more gruesome than I had imagined from its preview, and I could see 2 other images peeking behind them, waiting for my finger to the reveal. The first image was, though still grainy, confirming my suspicion. A dark and barren room, what looked like concrete and rusted pipes, and an elderly man lying naked on the floor in a pool of his own blood. There were cuts and marks on his back which faced the looming camera from which this photo had been taken. I presumed from the corner of the room. Shaking now, I pressed my fingers together on the screen. I pulled them apart and zoomed into parts of this image. The room looked damp, full of mildew, perhaps a basement or attic of some kind. My fingers trembled as I moved around the image, wanting to move anywhere but the corpse in the center. Nowhere else to look, however, I moved to the man's face. I understand you may think me a fool as I continue, or some overdramatic old man with an insufficient grasp on technology. I'm sure many of you will tell me this photo was doctored, or the product of AI, but you must believe the following. I know what I saw. The man in the photo was myself. The very same hair, eyebrows, lips. Though his eyes were closed, I know they were my own. I have no recollection of any event like this, no reason to have ever been in this room. I'm old, but my memory is sufficient, and I am absolutely certain I have never been in this position. But there I was, in this room, with my navel to the floor, my back full of cuts, and my body flat and contorted against concrete like roadkill. You may question the actions that followed this revelation. Indeed, I do too. Out of the same wretched desire as before, I viewed the next attachment. This time, I could be certain it was absolutely, without a shadow of the doubt, me. I heard myself screaming through duct tape, tied with rope to a wooden chair, pleading with the person behind the camera. I knew as certain as I know my own voice, my own face, that it was real. As I say, I have no recollection of this moment and no idea what to do. Was this person threatening me? Is this just some childish prank? I cannot say, and I hope that someone has some advice for me. I'm scared for my life, and I do not know how to approach this. I called in sick for work, but I am frightened for my and my wife's safety. Let me know what you think of that story, and if you have any scary stories of your own you'd like me to read, just DM me.
Horror lovers of Winnipeg, did you know that Winnipeg has a gem here and only a handful of these exist in the world? Come with me to a bookstore that is horror genre only. Okay. Ravens End Books is a locally owned horror bookstore owned by a proud member of our 2S LGBTQIA community. I already knew I would be obsessed with this place before even walking in. Not only do they have books by subgenre like books for children, which is literally amazing, plus books for middle-aged children, but they also have classics like H.P. Lovecraft, dark fantasy, hauntings, indigenous storytellers, sci-fi. The list goes on. But they also have things like horror games, jewelry from local artists. I literally love these spider earrings. So cute. T-shirts and clothes. I even clocked this horror coloring book, Don't Tease Me with a Good Time. Creepy crafts. This would be so fun for a little summerween vibe. Cute socks, journals, stickers, postcards. Peep my hot wife reading here. They also have 2 different book clubs, one for horror books and one for queer fantasy. If you're a horror lover in Winnipeg, go support local and check out Ravens End Books.
It's really eerie when you start to think about how many psychopaths live in the woods, in the forested areas, the national parks around this country and around the world. I mean, when you start to really get down to it, there are probably thousands of these deranged psychopaths, these serial unalivers, who are living right in the woods behind our house, in the national parks we visit on a regular basis. And, I think that this is an explanation for a lot of these missing 411 cases, is that there is simply some sort of deranged psychopath who chose to live out in the wilderness. And when you really think about it, right, this is a place that a serial unaliver would go, because it's secluded, there's no one around, there's no cameras, there's nobody watching, and they would know that people like to go out in nature, and they like to do it a lot of times alone. So they have this endless supply of prey basically coming to them, where they can do all this and it's completely disclosed. And I think a lot of these national parks and forest areas, they like to conceal it, because if they talked about it, people would no longer come there. They would lose money, and for financial reasons, they sort of sweep these things under the rugs. But yeah, I mean, there is a story that I did hear, and this is just recent. It was an article I was reading, that on the Colorado-Utah border, there was this man who was camping. And he said he was doing some dispersed camping, where you sort of camp on national forest or national park land. He was in his tent when he woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of someone ruffling the side of the tent walls. And it sounded like someone was walking around the tent, circling it. And so he stood up and just kind of waited there, hoping that whatever this was would leave. About 10 minutes pass, it's completely quiet. And he said the next thing is he knows, this tent collapsed in on him. And, he's scrambling to find the door. He finally unzips the zipper. He gets out of the tent and he takes off running to his vehicle. He sleeps in his car overnight. And the next morning, when he goes back to retrieve his tent and go to this campsite, he sees footprints, all around the campsite leading off into the woods. And that's just one of many stories that I've heard of people encountering these strange, weird people out in the middle of the woods. Living next to the woods can be creepy. It's not for everyone, because you will see things, you will hear things. It can get very weird. And there is a particular set of rules that if you find yourself living next to the woods or the forest, that you should follow. Now, the first rule is, at nighttime, always lock your doors, always close your curtains. Also, at nighttime, never look out the window facing the woods. If you hear a knock at your door at nighttime, do not answer it, especially if it is your back door. You will see lights coming from the woods. Do not follow them. Do not try and communicate with them. Just ignore them. And the most important thing you must remember is that anything you see outside, most likely it's not real. You are not seeing it, or you are not hearing it. Now, this story comes out of Tennessee. There's this man named Christian. Christian said that at one point in time, he grew up in this farmhouse that was out in the boonies. And he said they lived deep, deep in the woods, and it was a dirt road that took several miles to get to their house. And they literally had no neighbors around. Well, he said when they first moved in, there was a lot of weird stuff that would happen. For instance, the dogs didn't want to go anywhere near the woods. They would get to the tree line and they would turn around. And it was like they were afraid of something. They also noticed these deer. They would come into their yard at night and they would just be staring out into the woods like they were scared of something. And then one night, something very strange happened. So it was about 11 o'clock at night. And on the back door, they hear boom, 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 a knock. And that's when his father goes to the back door and he opens it up. There was no one out there. He said as he looked out into the woods, he started to hear screams. And it sounded like someone was in trouble. So he said he got up and him and his father went outside and they started looking around. They couldn't see anybody. So eventually they called the police. And the police came out and they searched the area. They couldn't find anyone. Well, on a regular basis, they started hearing screams outside their house coming from the woods. And every night, something would be knocking on their back door. A few times, they found the back door wide open. The other weird thing that started happening is Christian's brother started having these weird nightmares. And not only was he having nightmares, he started to sleepwalk. And he would get up from his bed, he would walk down the hallway into the kitchen and out the back door. And right before he would get into the woods, his dad or his mom would stop him and wake him up. And, this happened several times. Well, eventually his father put up like a camera outside because he was trying to figure out who's knocking on the back door. And one day he looks at the video and he sees his son going out the back door. And he notices he just starts looking around like he's looking for something out in the woods, like something was calling him. And finally, his father comes running out, stops him. So the father started to get really creeped out. He told Christian and his brothers and sisters, do not go out in the woods. And he said that's when one night there was a very loud banging sound coming from the back door. And it was almost like someone was trying to get in this door. So he said his father grabs a baseball bat. He goes to the back door and he opens it. And he looks around, and out of the corner of his eyes, he sees something moving in the woods. So he said his father started to make his way towards the wood line. And that's when he sees something run back further into the woods. So his father starts to go into the woods down this trail. And he said he could see this thing from a distance. And he noticed when he would kind of move, it would move. Or when he would turn to the right, it would turn to the right. Or when he would turn to the left, it would turn to the left. And he said whatever he would do, whatever movement he would do, this thing would follow. And he said that's when he realized whatever this was, it was almost like looking at a mirror. This thing was copying him. It was following his every movement. So his father turns around, takes off running through the woods, gets back in the house, and tells everyone, get in the vehicle, we are leaving. And they moved that night and left everything behind in the house. And he said still to this day, he has nightmares whenever he's near the woods because he still thinks about his time living in that place. In Oklahoma, there have been more drownings that are unexplained, people disappearing on the water, on lakes in this area, than any other place in the world. Now, a lot of people attribute this to what they believe is some sort of giant aquatic creature that lives in 3 lakes in Oklahoma. Now, I've studied this extensively, and I believe, without a doubt, there is something residing in Lake Thunderbird. Now, this story comes from actually Lake Thunderbird. There was this fisherman who said one night he went out on his bass boat and he was out in the middle of the lake. He had cast several lines out and he said he was just sitting there in his boat. Said, it was just a calm, clear night. The moon was out. There wasn't another boat in sight. And he said he just got this like eerie feeling. And he noticed just how calm, how still and placid the water was. And he said it was just like very quiet, which was odd. And he said all of a sudden, off in the distance, he hears a loud splashing sound. And then over in the other direction, he hears another loud splashing sound. And then in another direction, he hears this loud splashing sound. And he said as he looked out over the water with the moonlight shining on it, he started to see sort of this wake appear, and something very large was moving in the water towards his boat. And it got within a few meters. And then he said it just submerged it, and the water was calm. And so he said, you know what, I'm out of here. I'm pulling the lines in, and I'm going to leave. So he started reeling his lines in. And he said the next thing he remembers, like, he felt this sharp pain up the back of his leg all the way to his back. And he finds himself flying out of the boat into the water and going under. And he said the water was just murky, dark. He couldn't see anything. Something had a hold of him and was pulling him under. And he said that's when he sees these 2 luminous eyes that are staring at him. and he just started to fight as hard as he could to get out of like whatever this was hold. Said he managed to get free, and he starts swimming towards the light of his boat, gets up in his boat, and he just accelerates towards the shore. He gets to the dock, gets out of the boat, and he goes up to the shore. And that's when he notices he has several lacerations all up his leg and all up his back. And he said right at that moment he heard a loud splashing sound right by the dock. And he said there was this canoe that was tied off. And he said these like tentacles came out of the water, grabbed onto this canoe, and submerged this thing. And he said it just terrified him, and he ran out of there and has not been back to this place since. This second story takes place in the same area at the RV park. There was a woman who was staying there. She takes her dog one night for a walk along the lake. And she said she just remembered hearing splashing sounds coming from the water. And at first she thought it was just like a fish, but she said, whatever it was really large. As she's walking along the water line, she said she just kept hearing the splashing, like whatever this was following her. Then it got quiet for a little bit, and she said, well, it must be gone, whatever it was. She said the next thing she knows, her dog just starts barking and alerting her to something. She looks up ahead, and she said she sees this thing that was as large as a cow, and it's dragging itself along the shore. And she said her dog managed to slip the leash and takes off running towards this thing. She hears her dog yelp. This thing grabbed her dog and just starts dragging it into the water. And she said, it just threw her off guard and like terrified her. And she couldn't believe that there was something in the water that could take a 90-pound dog and just drag it into the water like it was nothing. This third story comes once again in the same general area. There was a man went out fishing one night on the shore, and he said, he cast his line out, and the next thing he knows, he said he's seen this just bright light in the sky. And he said he noticed it just kept getting brighter and brighter, and that's when he could see that this was some sort of like ball of light. And he said it just hovered over the lake, and it was kind of moving back and forth. And then he said it dropped down, and it went into the water, and he watched this thing submerge. And he said he could see like the glow of it as it went under the water, and then it just disappeared. So the next thing he knows, they're splashing right where his line is cast out. And he said he just dropped his pole and he ran off. And he said that like shook him up pretty bad. And he thinks that whatever was in that lake was associated to whatever that light was that he's seen in the sky. I grew up in a town called Peoria, and we had this legend of the Dingling Man. And I know it sounds ridiculous, but there was this real guy, which everyone in town called the Dingling Man. And he was like this 6'4", 6'5", tall, scary looking dude that had these very long dreads that like covered his face and these very creepy eyes. And like he never cut his fingernails. And you would see this dude everywhere in town. And like when we were kids, we'd be playing at the park, or we'd be in a field playing football. And there would be the Dingling Man just standing there like staring at us. And he would talk to himself, like he would, like laugh. And then he would like hum sometimes, and that was the scariest because he'd be like hum. And so like when you would hear that, it just freak you out because this dude was staring at you. And like he would chase, a lot of us kids around town and stuff. And like people would like see him like just jump like over 6-foot fences like it was nothing. And this dude would like climb up trees and stuff. And one story that I heard about the Dingling Man that's probably the creepiest was there was this kid. He was coming home from school. He unlocks his front door, goes inside, goes upstairs, and when he gets ready to go into his bedroom and he turns, there is the Dingling Man standing by his window with the window like wide open, and he's sitting there going like humming. And so this kid just like ran downstairs, runs out the front door, and his dad like right at that time pulled up from work, and he's like, Dad, like the Dingling Man's in my room. And so, like, the dad grabs a baseball bat and he goes into the house, goes upstairs into his room, and, like, he's gone. But he could see that the window was open, so he knew someone was in his room. And so he locked all the windows and the doors.
One of the closest times I've ever come to believing in ghosts is the night that my sister nearly peed herself in the graveyard. No, wait, she did pee herself, I think, a little bit. Years ago, when I was a teenager and my sister was younger, I was quite bored, and I used to drag her along with me to do things that I wanted to do, and I was watching all the paranormal videos on YouTube at the time. I had this interest in going to a graveyard at night, as I thought that would be a brilliant idea to have some fun and kill the boredom. Respectfully though, I didn't go there to disturb anybody or ruin anything or vandalize anything. I wanted to drag her with me, go to the graveyard, just go there. That was my idea. I was a teenager and I was bored and I'd just gotten my license, and that's what I chose to do with my time. So here's what happened. We got there, parked the car, walked in. We're already a bit nervous because it was silent. We're walking around, it's pitch black. We hear a loud crunch, like a footstep in leaves. There was leaves on the floor. Panic set in. One of us screamed, the other person screamed. One of us ran first, the other one followed, because that's what happens when you're in a panic. The other person has so much impact on how you react as well. So we both ran back to the car as fast as we could. The adrenaline was kicking in. We got in the car and I just slammed the doors shut, and I was trying to lock the door and I was that scared I couldn't find the door lock. All of a sudden I look up because I'm in the driver's seat and I actually see this dark figure walking towards the vehicle. All logic left my body. I was pointing at it and trying to say, freaking the hell out, and my sister saw her, and I think that's when she peed herself, because all logic would have left her body too, and I couldn't even find the door lock, and I was trying to go into survival mode. The figure was getting closer and closer, just walking up, unstoppable. Like, it wasn't an apparition. I wasn't making this. She could see it too. She could see it. I knew she saw it because she got more scared. I didn't think that was possible. At first it was panic, and at this point it was life or death to us. We watched the scary movies. We know how this ends. And now I'm that person in the scary movie who can't even bloody start her car and drive off. Then all of a sudden, on the window right next to me. And I look over and I think I started to calm down a bit because I just saw it was a human being. I tell you, like, it took a long time for me to calm down after this. I wanted to get the hell out of there after this and go home, but also I needed to cut because I had to drive, you know. I had to just compose myself and end up driving home. It ended up being one of the neighbours that lived close by. They heard somebody scream, so they were just walking up to check if we were okay. Didn't think of that at the time. We screamed in the graveyard. So a neighbour, a nice civilian, came out to make sure we were okay. A friendly Australian, hey, just checking, is everything okay? I heard screaming, and we told them, so sorry. Pretty sure we lied to them at the time because we were teenagers and we didn't want to get in trouble for going to the graveyard for no apparent reason. So we told him that we were just visiting our dead grandma to pay our respects. But that probably, in hindsight, that probably looked a bit weird, because why would you go at night time to visit your grandma? It's a bit odd. But because we were teenagers in the age, the person probably was just like, yeah, right, mate. Mm-hmm. Anyway, that's pretty much the gist of it. That's what happened. It ended up just being a person. And do I believe in ghosts now? I've had experiences, but like I have not really that into it. Also, if you've done anything silly as a teenager and you've accidentally traumatized yourself. Moral of the story, I've never been chased by a ghost, but I have scared myself so badly in a graveyard that my sister probably peed her pants. I think she did. She'll let me know. I'm pretty sure she did.
Also, just quickly to my sister, if you're watching this, I'm so sorry about that. I'm sorry for traumatizing you. I think you were like 15 at the time, but you're my best friend.
Series of spooky stories, a paranormal experience comment thread. I was walking down the stairs and I was home alone. I tripped slightly and dropped my phone down the stairs, and all I heard was "careful" in a little girl's voice. I mean, sweet, but creepy. My grandfather died in 1938, and our family did not know, but our clock stopped in 1938, the same day. After a while, we got the news that he died at that time, and our clock started working again after a few hours. He wanted y'all to know. Not paranormal, but I remember one time we were driving through my childhood area, and I swear I saw myself as a child. Same t-shirt that I used to wear, same face, same hair, same weight, same everything. It was so trippy. Are you a time traveler? It's giving paranormal. I live near the Appalachian Mountain. Immediately no. One time in the middle of winter, I heard cries, screams, and sounds that were trying to sound like a human. Hard pass. Someone kept saying my name. It was 2 a.m. and it sounded exactly like my dead grandpa saying, "I'm here, come downstairs." Then I heard creaks at my door, and I hid away because I'm a wuss, and I saw feet under the door, and then it disappeared. I feel like hiding is a normal reaction in this situation. My brother got dragged out of bed by something in the form of a child wanting something to play with, and it occasionally runs around my house, but isn't seen. That was the only time it was ever seen, and its energy lives in my room above my brother's bed in the corner. Don't you wish that you could sue people in the afterlife for pain and suffering? Because why the fuck would you do this to me? I was home alone and I could hear my own voice upstairs. I thought I left something playing. I walked into my room, and I saw myself just sat by my bed giggling. I turned around because at the time I wasn't really there in the head and turned back to see myself in a white dress walking downstairs humming a song my uncle used to sing before he passed. Holy shit. When I was younger, I got up to go to the toilet and I walked out of my bathroom. Straight in front of me was some random tall outline of someone. It had long claws and red eyes. I started crying and ran into my mom's room. I still don't know what it was. Fucking scary? That's what it was. My closet opens at night, and if I stay awake too long, I see eyes in the closet and in a corner of my room with a black silhouette. Sometimes I even feel so unsafe that I'm too scared to let my dog on the ground, so I keep him on the bed with me under the covers. Shout out to you for looking out for Scooby too. I saw a shadow figure in my room with a rope tied around its neck. I told that to my friend, and her sister had seen that man too in their bed. One time when me and my sister were out doing our chores, since we have a farm out in the middle of nowhere in the Appalachian Mountains, we saw a person. Again, Appalachian Mountains, already a no. My idiotic sister thought it was a person, so she whistled Espresso by Sabrina Carpenter, and the Skinwalker started chasing us. Even if you did think that it was a person, just don't. It even came through our basement, and this is where it begins. Days later, we started hearing children running up the stairs and ballroom music. We went to check, there was no one. A week later, we found out our house was haunted, so we moved out, and 2 years later, it became a very famous haunted house. I was about 7 or 8, and I was getting dressed in front of the mirror, and I felt my shoulders getting heavy, like something was leaning on me. I looked back, and I saw nothing. So when I looked at the mirror again, I saw a woman with curly gray hair and bright red lipstick on, and black eyes. I screamed. I told my mom, but she didn't believe me, and to this day, no one believes me. I do. That's scary as fuck. When I was way younger, I was watching a video and I heard something whisper my name from the corner of my room. I paused it, heard it whisper my name again. Instantly bolted out of my room and I couldn't sleep there for a little while. I wouldn't be able to sleep there ever. I was home alone and I heard a mimic say my name, so I locked my doors. Then the power went out. Fuck no. One time, I woke up and I saw the Hat Man staring at me by my bed, and when I looked at him, he started to flinch and then disappeared slowly. I was on holiday and I shared a room with my brother, and I woke up in the middle of the night to black shadowy figures moving around back and forth across the room. This happened for 20 minutes straight, and it was like I was paralyzed and I couldn't move when I saw them, but I finally managed to put a sleeping mask on and go to sleep. That was the craziest thing I'd ever witnessed. Yikes on bikes, bitch.
Let's watch a scary video. This video was posted by TV Azteca Querétaro, and it came across my feed at 3 in the morning and terrified me, so I knew I had to share. In this video, we see some friends hanging out at a playground late at night. One friend is sitting on a swing while the other friend records him, and it seems totally fine and innocent until the person behind the camera starts talking.
Satanás, ¿eres tú? Si eres tú, manifiéstate y mueve a Güero más. Guacha, ¿cómo lo jalan para atrás? Te reto a que... Mira.
Terrifying. It's also the fact that the person behind the camera had no problem saying that even though they were outside late at night on their own. Honestly though, that's kind of what they get for playing around like that. Take this creepy video as an informational one too, that you should never challenge ghosts, demons, and especially not the devil. Let's look at some scary photos sent in by you. Both of these photos were actually sent in by the same person, and I think they're so creepy. My niece and I love watching your videos and your scary content. We wanted to share 2 scary photos that were taken by us. One photo was when I went to a cemetery in Victorville, California, and took some photos of what I found. I caught what looks like a woman in an old Victorian dress standing up on the stairs. The stairs were completely empty, but somehow you can see her in the photo. This next photo is of my cousin trick-or-treating. She wanted to take a photo in front of this specific house. She was completely alone when the photo was taken, but when we looked back at that photo, it looks like there's something standing behind her.
I need to tell you guys this ghost story. This story was sent into my email, and if you have any ghost stories, paranormal encounters, or scary stories that you want to share, you can send them to the email in my bio. When I was 8 years old, my family moved into an enormous Victorian house in southern Ontario. It was, as you can imagine, absolutely beautiful. The home stood 3 stories tall, built in 1896, with gorgeous towering windows, creaky hardwood floors, and more rooms than we could ever possibly use. The place felt endless. There were hallways that stayed dark even during the day, staircases that echoed with every step, and rooms that sat completely empty because we simply didn't have enough furniture to fill them. My parents got the house for an unbelievable price. And in it, there was one detail that everyone seemed to mention in hushed tones. The previous owner had died in that home, specifically in the back living room. Most people would have probably turned that room into an office or left it empty, but my parents turned it into the playroom. It became the place where my older sister and I spent almost all of our time. We watched TV there, played with toys, had sleepovers with our friends, and used it to escape from the rest of the massive house. There was one thing about that room that always bothered me, though. There was a single door tucked into a corner. The basement door. Now, the basement itself was unfinished. Just old stone walls, exposed beams, and freezing cold air that hung around no matter what season it was. Neither of us liked going down there. But despite all of that, it was the door itself that freaked us out. The previous owners hadn't just put one lock on it. There were 3. The regular door lock, a deadbolt, and a chain lock fastened across the top. As a kid, I remember staring at those locks and wondering why anyone would need that much security for a basement. My sister used to joke that they were trying to keep ghosts from getting upstairs. At the time, we laughed and joked about it. But thinking back to it now, well, one night during Christmas break, my sister and I stayed up much later than we were supposed to. The house was quiet. Our parents had gone to bed hours earlier. Outside, fresh snow covered everything, making the night feel even more quiet and peaceful. The brightest light in the home was from the television flickering across the room. I remember checking the clock. It was somewhere around 2 in the morning. Suddenly, everything went black. The television shut off, the lights went out, and the entire room went dark. For a second, we thought the power had gone out, but when we looked into the hallway, the rest of the house still had electricity. Confused, we turned the TV back on and flipped the light switch. Everything worked normally again. We shrugged it off, complaining about old wiring. A couple of minutes passed. Then it happened again. Instant darkness, TV off, lights out. The room felt uneasy, but again, everything turned back on without a problem. At that point, we were understandably nervous, but we were trying to convince ourselves that there had to be some sort of explanation. Then, only a few moments later, it happened a third time. Except, accompanying the darkness was a loud crack that echoed above us. Before either of us could react, one of the wooden blades from the ceiling fan snapped off and flew across the room, shot toward the couch where we were sitting, and crashed into the wall beside us. The fan itself hadn't even been turned on. Neither of us moved. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. That's when we heard it. Metal scraping against metal, slowly and dragging, and then click. The deadbolt on the basement door had unlocked by itself. Our heads snapped toward the door, none of us saying a word. I don't even think we were breathing at that point. And we watched in horror as the chain lock slid loose. We had seen and experienced enough. My sister grabbed my hand and we ran faster than we ever had in our lives and didn't stop until we reached her bedroom upstairs. We pushed furniture against the door and slept in the same bed that night. From that night on, we never slept alone again in that house. Every single night until we moved out, we stayed together because we both had this feeling that whatever had unlocked that basement door might come looking for us. About a year later, my family moved out of that house, and whatever activity we had experienced didn't follow us. Never experienced anything again, but whenever I think about that old Victorian house, I think of that door and its locks, and what was possibly behind it, lurking in the basement shadows.
So as most of you guys know, I'm currently visiting Hawaii. For the first few days that I was here, I actually stayed at my kid's father's house. He lives out here permanently. When I first walked into his house, the first thing I noticed was how calming and pure the energy in his house felt, which is something that I haven't felt before in a really long time, walking into someone's house. Didn't think anything of it. That night, since we got here pretty late, we were exhausted, and the kids and we all went to sleep. Before going to bed, for whatever reason, I did something that I shouldn't have. I pretty much said out loud, like with love and respect, if there's anyone here that would like to communicate, you're more than willing to do so in my dreams. You guys know I'm like super sensitive to the paranormal or the spiritual world. That night I had a very, very vivid dream with this older lady. I even saw when she walked into the bedroom. And she literally like goes into my dreams. In the dream, I'm sitting in the kitchen with her and we're baking bread together. It's like an ordinary day with me and her, and we're just like chatting up, and she's telling me about her life story. And the whole time I feel like this warm, like homey feeling just being around her. I wish I could remember some of the stuff she was telling me in the dream, but I really can't. The only thing I can remember is right before I woke up, she says to me, "Can you tell him to take care of my garden?" I wake up, I'm confused because as far as I know, he doesn't have a garden. I don't know who this old lady is. Like, I'm trying to put the pieces together. That morning while I'm drinking coffee, I'm talking to him about like, you know, like the history of the house and like how long he's lived here, etc. And I ask him, I'm like, "Do you have a garden?" And he looks at me kind of like weird. He was like, "I guess you can say so. It's like a little small garden out back." And then he takes me into his room. I didn't notice there was actually a door in his bedroom that leads to a small little garden like back there. He shows me the garden and it looks a little bit unkempt, like he hasn't really been keeping up with it. He was like, "Yeah, apparently there was an old lady that used to live here before that would sit out here, she would garden, but like after I moved in, like I didn't keep up with it. All I know is that she passed away, which is right before I got the house." So I'm like, that's what she meant. She wants him to take care of her garden. Then he continues to say, "Right after I moved in, I actually had some of the neighbors come over to introduce themselves, and they told me about the really nice old lady that used to live in this house. And they jokingly asked if I baked, and I told them no, I don't bake. And then they said how the old lady that used to live in that house would bake. She loved to bake, and she would bake these delicious like loaves of bread for like all of the neighbors, and how much they missed her after she had passed." So now I 100% sure know that that wasn't a dream. That was a visitation. I welcomed her. She showed up. She was nice. I did tell him to take care of the garden, so hopefully he listens. But it just still blows my mind how these things just like happen. They're unexplained. Like, I have no way of knowing any of that, but so obviously I'm not going crazy. That's all I have to say.
And here are more reasons why Laurel Canyon is still considered to be one of the most haunted pockets in and around Los Angeles. I mean, if you think about it, the history dating back all the way to the early 20s and even the 70s, and also the legends and lores about the tunnel system, then you know about the ghost stories that definitely circulate in and around that area. So let's get started. Let's talk about singer and songwriter Tyler Lyle. In a recent interview with iHeartRadio, Tyler Lyle, the lead singer of one of my favorite bands, The Midnight, revealed that when he first moved to Los Angeles, he rented a room in a house tucked away in Laurel Canyon near Mulholland Drive. Sounds dreamy, right? Not if you're hearing weird footsteps outside of your bedroom door at late hours of the night. According to Tyler, this would happen every single night, along with strange activity that would happen in and around the home. And those would be the experiences that would inspire him to write the songs that would make his band The Midnight best known for. Which honestly, it really does make you feel like you're driving through Laurel Canyon at 2 a.m. in the morning. And if you were like me in the early 2000s, partying on Sunset and then cutting through Laurel Canyon at 2 a.m., then tú sabes, you know. And I'm sure a lot of you guys are like, well, what is the house? There has to be a story behind the house, right? Well, if the research and the timeline actually serves me correctly, based on what Tyler mentioned, especially with two very famous musicians that once stayed there when they arrived to the US, it's quite possible that Tyler lived on a property that belonged to a very famous musician, John Mayall. And this dude in the 1970s owned this house that became a gathering place for musicians, jam sessions, and even in Tyler's interview, he mentions that this was the location where Christine and Stevie McPhee of Fleetwood Mac, along with Stevie Nicks, were both connected to this location, and local lore even claims the hillside of where this home once stood actually inspired Stevie Nicks to write her hit song, Landslide. But the original house Tyler was talking about isn't actually standing anymore. In 1979, a devastating brush fire swept through Laurel Canyon and destroyed John Mayall's house, along with decades of personal archives, music, and memorabilia, and the house was later rebuilt in the early 1980s. Now, I went online and I plugged in the address according to my research of where the original John Mayall house once stood. And this canyon soil is where tons of legendary music history unfolded. So my question is, was Tyler actually really hearing ghosts? former rock stars or musicians who were still trying to finish their albums from beyond the grave. Regardless, it still inspired some of the most amazing music that I've ever heard the Midnight put out. And if you're interested in listening to their music, I highly recommend that you start with Endless Summer and work your way up. Ooh, my favorite song, Sunset. I mean, this is Laurel Canyon, darling, and I would be very suspicious if a house here wasn't haunted. Let me know what you guys think. Have you heard any more stories connected to Laurel Canyon? Let me know in the comments, and always remember to stay haunted and weep.
My story takes place in Chihuahua, Mexico, back in 2015. I was 11 years old at that time. I live in the US, but my mom decided we should visit Mexico during my summer break to spend time with family since almost all of our relatives are from there. My family lives in one of the more rundown barrios, where it can be dangerous to walk alone because of the gangs and kidnappings that used to be common. Because of this, I was never alone in this story that I'm about to share. I was close to my cousin, who was around the same age as me, so we were always together. She moved around a lot, going from house to house, and to be honest, all of her houses creeped me out. But there was one in particular that still sends chills down my spine every time I walk past it. Whenever we visited Mexico, we always stayed at my grandma's house. My cousin's house was only a 5-minute walk from there. Like I mentioned before, my grandma's neighborhood was pretty run down. Most of the houses were old and worn out, but my cousin's house was different. Her house was beautiful. It was 2 stories, freshly painted white, and looked pristine compared to the others. It had a massive white see-through gate and 4 large windows. But despite its appearance, there was something about the house that felt off. At the time, Netflix was a big deal, and my cousin was the only one who had access to it. My sister and 2 of my older cousins would often go to her house just to watch movies. Well, one afternoon, my cousin and I were at my grandma's house when we got bored and decided to go watch a movie at her place. Since we knew my sister and cousins were already inside, my cousin didn't bother asking her mom for the house key. We walked over and knocked on the door. No one answered. We knocked again, and still nothing. After waiting a while, we decided to sit near a small food store across the street from her house. Since her windows were thin, we figured my sister and cousins would eventually hear us. My cousin started calling out my sister's name, yelling for her to open the door.
Might have known the story of real-life boogeyman.
A series of spooky stories, but it's unhinged mother-in-laws. Another anonymous one, my ex-mother-in-law, when she found out that her son was beating me, said, I quote, "How many times are you giving him adult fun playtime? Have you been cooking his meals? You must have done something to him." Also said while I was pregnant with his son, it's not even his. Zero contact with any of them now. My ex is in jail for the R word of a minor. I hope they all rot in hell. My partner was in the hospital. It wasn't great, but not life-threatening. Mother-in-law rang me drunk in the middle of the night during this week and told me how sad she was that he was in the hospital and that she just couldn't take it and was going to unalive herself. Told me that I had to say goodbye to all of her family for her and hung up. She was fine. She had passed out in her bed. I've never forgiven her for that. Was she involuntarily committed after that? Because what the fuck is this? Said I was being dramatic when I found out that I had to have a hysterectomy at age 28 because I cried. That's a big fucking deal. I could write a book, but the one that takes the cake is that she told my husband that she hoped that I died so she could live in a world without me and have him back. We are no contact. I have cancer. Who fucking says that shit? And why do these women want to fuck their sons so bad? Why do they want to be with their sons? I don't get it. My mother-in-law said to my 3-year-old daughter as she was taking pictures of her, "Let's get a picture without mommy's fat tummy in the background. I'm 9 months pregnant." Pregnant or fucking not. Knock that bitch the fuck out. I was 8 months pregnant, just got off 4 months of bed rest. My mother-in-law bought me Slim Fast because my belly was getting too big. I lost 50 pounds while I was pregnant. She told my kids to lie to me. Not my husband's kids, mind you. He is the stepdad. We are no contact. If a bitch ever tells my fucking kids to lie to me, they're gonna be lying on the ground with a bloody fucking nose.
He said, "Oh shit," and then the phone just went silent. Lip gloss on so I can run this mouth. Now focus. True crime gossip time. Brandon Swanson was 19 years old. He had been living at home with his mom and dad, but attending college. He lived in Marshall, Minnesota. He had just finished school. It was May 13th, 2008, when he decided to go to a party in Canby, Minnesota. He was there for a short while before he left to go to another party at a friend's house that lived closer to Lind, Minnesota. On his way home from that party around 1:30 in the morning, he was in an accident. He slid off into a ditch. He wasn't injured. The car wasn't really bad. He was just kind of stuck. So he called his parents to come get him. They immediately got in the car, went to find him. They drove around for about 20 minutes, talking to him the entire time, but they weren't able to find him. So he said, I can see some lights. I think Lind is just right there. I'm going to try to walk to the city so that you can find me better. Well, his dad told him, please don't, just stay at the car. We'll find you. It's fine. He said, no, I'm going to walk towards the lights. So he jumped a fence, walked through some fields. The entire time he's telling his dad, like, hey, you know, this is that, this is wherever I'm at, like trying to give him like landmarks to find him. But they never found him. He was on the phone with his parents for about 47 minutes when he said, oh shit, and then the phone just went silent. His dad tried calling him back. It would ring a little bit and then went to voicemail. They never found him. They found his car, and he was actually about 20 miles from where he said he was. So if the lights weren't the town, what were they? Some have said that they're will-o'-the-wisp, which is like fairy folklore, that they would lure you to dangerous situations. Some have said that they were bog lights, kind of the same thing. Some think that he might have fallen into like a sinkhole or into some sort of water. Some think that it might have been aliens, that might be the reason why he yelled out, oh shit. I don't know. All I know is it has to be so sad for the parents to have been on the phone when this happened and then never have any closure whatsoever. This happened in 2008. They didn't really have the technology that they have now, but from what I've researched, even if they did, it's really hard to find a phone once it's off. But the fact that he's disappeared completely, no sign of him at all, where is he? What happened? What do you think happened to Brandon Swanson?
Am I a horrible person for kicking my husband and pregnant sister-in-law out of my house? Hear me out before you judge me. Story time. So, myself and husband, we have been trying to have babies, but unfortunately, I have had miscarriages. I had a miscarriage not long ago, very recent I'm talking about. So, fast forward. My sister-in-law, which is my husband's younger sister, she came to our home, which is my home. When I say my home, I bought a house and I paid it in full. My husband lives there for free. He doesn't pay rent. He doesn't pay bills. I pay the bills. I pay for food, groceries. He doesn't do anything. Bearing in mind, he works full-time. So we've got that clear. Anyway, my sister-in-law came round crying at my house, and we sat her down asking her what the problem is. And she said that she is pregnant, but her boyfriend doesn't want anything to do with the pregnancy and wants her to get rid of it. And she doesn't want to. And she has got nowhere to be because she was living with her boyfriend. And then they obviously broke up. So myself and husband took him in. I tried my best, despite the fact that I just had a miscarriage. So I was there for her. I made sure she felt at home and felt like a little sister to me. And I treated her very well. But then things turned for the worse because she's a dirty person. I've never lived with her, so I didn't know. She's not tidy. She's very dirty. She leaves her dirty clothes everywhere in the house. Dirty plates, she leaves them everywhere. To the point that she's even leaving sex toys on our kitchen counter, which was a bit weird because why the hell do you want to leave stuff like that lying around? I spoke to her and she was crying. She went straight to my husband, which is her brother, saying that I'm being a bit too harsh on her and I'm not considerate the fact that she's pregnant. You know, I need to look after her and she hasn't got the strength or energy to do these things, but she promised that she will do better. I thought that was it. But after that talk, she just went worse. I'm talking about even doing things, and I think this is now on purpose, to the point that I went and bought my food because of, you know, the miscarriage. I'm just comfort eating and I love this kind of food. And I've specifically told her not to eat it because I need it and I was going to have it later on because I work from home. Only for me to come back and that food was gone. When I approached her and told her that she knew very well and I told her why did she eat it, she run again to my husband telling him that I'm so inconsiderate, I'm so selfish, I'm so not like welcoming? Why am I being angry? And my husband comes to me telling me that I should stop being selfish and start looking after, you know, his sister because she's pregnant and she needs more help. And by doing so, God will also bless me with my own. I looked at him to think, this is a joke, right? And he's like, no, I'm not joking. I was like, okay, this is really crazy. And I'm sitting there thinking, you are both living in my house for free, the house that I paid for free, bills that I pay for, food that I pay for, and yet again, you're disrespecting me like this. The thing that actually pushed me to the edge was she decided with my husband that they were going to have a baby shower. They invited their family and her friends, and his friends, of course. I did not know about this. They didn't even tell me. Only for me to turn back home to find out that they were having a baby shower. And then my husband and his sister decided to stand up and make an announcement that everyone should come and have a look at the baby nursery that they have decorated. And I'm thinking, hang on, I thought she was just going to be staying with us for a couple of months and then she's going to find her own place and move out. Since when was she going to be staying here, giving birth here in my house without anyone telling me? How disrespectful. So they walked up to the nursery that I had designed and worked hard for. I paid everything for our baby that I miscarried. I was surprised, and this was it for me. I lost it. I was upset. I was angry. I was crying. And I confronted them both. I was like, what is going on here? Why are you doing this? And my sister-in-law turned around and tell me, I should stop being bitter. The fact that I'm not able to carry children, that doesn't mean that, you know, she can't be happy. I should be happy for her and stop being jealous. I looked at my husband and he's not saying anything. And I just lost it. I told her that she's selfish and they both need to move out of my house. This is my house and I pay for everything. Only for his family, the rest of his family, looking at me with this look of disgust, as if I was the one in the wrong. I lost it and I left. Anyway, everyone left. Next day, my husband comes back to the house pleading and saying that, oh, let's just give it another go. I was like, no, grab your stuff and leave. And he said that it is my fault that I've had all these miscarriages. So I shouldn't be taking this out on his sister. And that was it for me. I slapped him. Yes, I did. I shouldn't have done, but I slapped him. And he started breaking and destroying everything in my house. And that was it for me. People are saying that I could have just kept quiet, let her give birth and then move out, and it wasn't a big deal. But the fact that they disrespected me, my own home, no one even cared to talk to me about, you know, these things, and then they're actually doing things that they want in my own home. No, I'm not having that. I'm not having this in my home. So do you think I'm an idiot? Do you think I'm an asshole? Do you think I'm a horrible person for kicking my husband and my pregnant sister-in-law out of my house? I'd like to know what you think. Not that I care anyway.